Today, we're going to be talking to an amazing person. He's an old friend and has done so many amazing things in his life. I cannot wait to dive into this conversation with Mr. Michael Taylor. Well, let me read you a little bit about his bio before we get started. Coach Michael Taylor is an irrepressible optimist. That is an understatement. With a passion for the impossible. He is an entrepreneur, author of 8 books, motivational speaker, and radio host who has committed his life to empowering men and women to transform their lives from the inside out. Thank you, Michael Taylor, for being on the podcast today.
Absolutely. It is my absolute pleasure to join you. I was so excited when I saw you launching your podcast. I said, wow, let me just jump in there with Frank and have a conversation. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. And you were one of the first people that reached out to me. And I've known you for such a long time. You're married to a dear friend of mine, and you have a beautiful marriage. And so it's exciting to really talk about the other parts of the things that you do in the world. And you've been doing this work for such a long time. So before we talk about this wonderful book that I'm going to hold up, this is an amazing book, one of the books that Michael's written, his latest book, and it's called The New Face of Entrepreneurship, an Entrepreneur's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Profits in Business. So we're going to talk a lot about this book, but before that, Michael, I want them to hear a little bit of this amazing story or this amazing journey that have you doing the work that you do today.
Well, let's go back almost 55 years. I was born in the inner city projects of Corpus Christi, Texas, to a single mom with 6 kids, and we were basically the poster children for poverty back in the 60s. But my mom instilled in me this sense of optimism and possibility that despite our circumstances, there was a part of me that knew that I was destined to do something amazing in the world. Yes. So from 6 to 13, I was separated from my mom. I had to go live with my grandparents. And it was there that I awakened this drive, this desire to become an entrepreneur. Because when I was 10 years old, I went to my grandfather and I remember telling him, I said, Grandpa, when I grow up, I'm going to be rich. And he asked me how I was going to do that. And I told him that I was going to own my own company. Wow. And he said, wow, that's a great goal to have. And he says, now, if you want to be rich, if you want to own your own company, I'm going to share 2 things that you have to do. He said, the first thing you got to do is if you want to be rich, you have to learn to think like rich people. Because the only difference between rich people and poor people is how they think. He said, the second thing is if you're going to be rich, you have to learn to listen. He said, because rich people will tell you how they got rich, but it is up to you to take what you learn from them and apply it to your own life. And he said, that means reading their stories. You know, he was a big advocate of teaching me to making sure that I read a lot of books, even at a really early age. But he said, listening is the key. And so I took those 2 lessons to heart. And so I was separated from my mom for about 7 years. So now I moved back with my mom when I was 13 years old. And I started my first company when I was 14. Wow. I happened to be walking down the street on my way to school when I heard an argument between these 2 guys in this motorcycle shop. And the mechanic was arguing with the owner because he didn't want to sweep the floors. So I walk in and I tell the guy, I said, look, I can solve your problem. Why don't you hire me to clean your garage? And the guy was so impressed, he gave me a job. I started cleaning his garage, and it turns out he had 3 other friends that had garages. So at the age of 14, I had 4 customers that I was.
Look at you.
And I was, being an entrepreneur. Yeah. And so then when I got to high school, I really, really loved music. And so I became a DJ. I bought my own equipment and I'd go around and do parties and proms and everything, made a lot of money doing that. And then I also loved installing car stereos. And so I had another side business where I would install car stereos for my friends. So all during my high school years, I was working and I didn't play sports. I was always being an entrepreneur. Yeah. And so when I was 17 actually, I decided to drop out of high school because I convinced myself that I could get rich selling vacuum cleaners, which was a really bad choice. But I learned a very valuable lesson in that choice. And that lesson was I was not afraid to take risks.
Yeah.
And so despite the fact that I never sold a single vacuum cleaner, it was really a great choice for me because it taught me that I was courageous enough to follow my heart, follow my passion, and pursue my dreams. Well, fortunately for me, I landed a job with a building supply center. I worked extremely hard, climbed the corporate ladder. At the age of 22, I was the youngest manager in the history of this particular company. At the age of 23, I was living the American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids and all of that. And by society standards, I had made it.
Right.
Within about a 6-year time frame, that American dream turned into the American nightmare as I went through a divorce, a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a deep, deep state of depression. And I was actually homeless for 2 years living out of my car.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, I was able to rebuild my life. And in doing so, I decided to chronicle and share the lessons I learned with others through my books. And that's when I became an author and a speaker. And that's what I do. I share lessons with others to support them and empower them to overcome adversities and to live the life of their dreams.
Yes, that's in a nutshell. But you share your stories so vulnerably and so authentically in the book. But what I love is that you really, along the way, have chronicled all of the different lessons and the work that you've put in to really becoming the person that you are. You didn't just arrive at being this, positive, motivational person. You've done so much work, so much deep work on yourself. And you chronicle that. I mean, I can't remember what I did like in high school. You remember these details about your life in order to really impart these lessons in the book. And so I found that to be really inspiring. And I really want you to, because you talk about entrepreneurship, I want you to define for us what you mean when you say entrepreneur. What does that mean to you?
Well, my definition of an entrepreneur is a little different from your standard definition. See, I believe an entrepreneur is simply someone who receives compensation in exchange for a product or a service. And so it is that definition that really drives me as an entrepreneur, because I was the guy that was always chasing money as an entrepreneur. My driving force was, how can I get rich? You remember the conversation I had with my grandfather, right?
Yes.
So I'd always had this idea that an entrepreneur was someone who made a lot of money.
Yes.
Well, it wasn't until I lost everything that I came to a different understanding of what true wealth really is.
Right.
And it doesn't have a whole lot to do with money, really. Obviously, money is a big part of that. But for me, what I've learned through this journey, and I think what a lot of entrepreneurs are missing, is understanding as an entrepreneur, there are really 3 types of compensations we should receive. And again, like most entrepreneurs, we always think of financial compensation, which is important,
Right.
but there's also spiritual and there's also emotional compensation that a lot of times entrepreneurs don't really talk about.
Right.
What I've learned is until you balance those 3 types of compensation as an entrepreneur, you will never really feel fulfilled.
Yes.
There's always something missing. I don't care how much money you make. I don't care how much stuff you have. If you don't have that emotional and spiritual component, something will be missing. So what I'm attempting to do with this particular book is let entrepreneurs know the importance of understanding those 3 types of compensation.
And I love that because I feel so strongly and that I agree with you on that. I feel like the fulfillment has to incorporate more than just making money, because that just by and of itself is never going to, because once you make as much money as you want to make, then what? So there has to be something else that's driving you. So I love that you explained that. I have a lot of questions for you, but so bear with me. But you mentioned that there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. Why do you believe that, Michael?
Well, as mentioned in the beginning, I am an irrepressible optimist with a passion for impossible.
You really are.
And so I have come to that conclusion for a couple of reasons. Number one, my belief is that every human being has a divine purpose. We all have specific or unique gifts and talents, and it is our responsibility to figure out what those are. And fortunately for me, I was able to discover my divine purpose, which is writing and speaking and empowering others. That's one of the reasons why I'm optimistic. But I'm also optimistic because I also believe in human evolution. And here's what I mean by that. If you turn on the TV right now, you're probably going to hear a story about something that's wrong with the world, be it racism, be it global warming. It's our media constantly bombards us with negativity and pessimism. And that's why the majority of people have such a pessimistic view of the world. But if we turn off the TV and if we spend a little time just really getting to know who we are and what makes the world go round, there's a whole different way to view the world. Because I believe the media only shows us approximately, and there was a guy that did a study on this, but approximately 10% of what's actually happening in the world.
Right.
And of that 10% that they show you, 90% of it is negative.
Yes.
So we are constantly bombarded with all this negativity. And so therefore most people think, oh my gosh, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Well, once again, I believe in human evolution, and I believe that there is a divine creator, there's a divine intelligence that set all of this in motion. And this intelligence knows exactly what it's doing. And it's actually evolving. And we as human beings are evolving with it. And so for those of us who are willing to take that deep dive into self and make that connection with this divine intelligence, then our lives become rewarding and fulfilling, and there's passion and there's joy. And that's the whole intention of this book, to help people understand that, first of all, it's important to have an optimistic attitude. But secondly, to know that there is a part of us that is divine, that we're connected to. And when we connect to it and create an intimacy with it, it can divide, or not, it will guide us to do what we were put on the planet to do.
Yes. And you don't just tell people, look, just be optimistic. What I like about it is that you talk about the work that you did to get to that point, because you do talk about your depression, you do talk about the divorce and the impact that it had on you and the homelessness. But you, throughout the story, some of the stories in there are so good, like the one where you were working in the video store and the wealthy guy comes in, and you and him are having this conversation, and you're just being great and talking to him, not knowing he's a very successful man that could later really seed into your life. But you were just being your best self in how you showed up and helped him. And then he had an ability to introduce you to somebody who funded an idea that it was just incredible, the synergy that happened just because of your approach to how you lived your life. And well, I love that story so much. You can probably tell a little better than I can.
But see, here's the important part about the book and what I'm trying to say, is that the story that you mentioned, which I'll share, is really about synchronicities.
Yes.
And if we have a relationship and a connection to that which is greater than ourselves, you can call it whatever you want to call it. You can call it God, the universe, whatever. I call it divine intelligence. When we have a connection to divine intelligence, as mentioned, it will guide us to where we need to go. And there's an important part of the book, and I talk about the power of intuition and how to be willing to listen to that still small voice which is within us. And so that intuition, again, is the voice of the divine, I believe. And so just to kind of recap that story, I was so broke, I couldn't pay attention. I was living in this rundown, dilapidated one room, and it wasn't really a bedroom. It was just this little room that I was living in. I had a bicycle for transportation. I would ride my bike approximately 20 miles each way, back and forth to work. because the only job I could find was at this video store making basically minimum wage. You know, this was after my divorce and everything. But I had this vision of creating this company where I developed some self-esteem building programs for kids. And so I'm doing all this spiritual work, you know, I'm connecting to source and divine intelligence, and I'm trusting that, you know what, this stuff works, you know, so I just have to focus and stay, you know, focused and moving toward this vision I had. So I'm working in this video store. A guy comes in with his kids and he asked for a movie review. Yeah. And so I made a couple of reviews, and he took the movies home. He loved the movies. His daughters loved the movies. He came back a couple of days later, thanked me for making the recommendations. So he and I kind of became friends because he kept asking me for movies. Well, one day he comes in and we started talking, and it turns out that the guy had cancer. And I looked at the guy and I said, I may not have the right to say this, but this is something that I've learned. I said, I've learned that no matter how difficult things might be, no matter what adversity we may be going through, I believe there's always a gift and a lesson in it. And the guy looked at me and he said, you know what? I agree 100%. He says, because since I've been diagnosed with cancer, he said, what I've learned is, number one, I was really just not a very nice person, and I won't use the words that he used.
Right.
He says, my cancer has allowed me to realize, number one, I've become a better father.
Yes.
He said, I've become a better husband. He said, all because of this diagnosis. So he says, I agree with you 100%. So this guy goes away, and a few days later, he comes back, and me and a coworker were working. He comes in, he rents a movie, he goes away. So my coworker says, Michael, do you know who that is? I said, yeah, that's Mike. He's a good cousin. He says, no, do you know who that is? I go, yeah, that's Mike. He's a good cousin. He goes, no. He goes, that dude is rich. He said, that guy owns an oil company. And I go, really? So a week or so passed, Mike comes back in the store, and I said, Mike, I understand that, you know, you own your own company. I said, you know, I've had this vision of creating this company for a while, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to take a look at it and maybe support it. He says, Michael, whatever you're doing, he said, I definitely want to be involved. Definitely want to be involved. So he gives me his card. I make an appointment to go see him. I go to his office, and his office is like something you see on television. I mean, there's him with pictures of presidents on the wall. I mean, it's just nothing but wealth, right, and affluence. Yeah. So I tell him about my idea for this company. He sits there for a moment, he smiles. He picks up the phone and he calls some guy on the phone. He says, hey, Walter, I've got this guy that I'm gonna send to you. I want you to help him out. He's got a really good idea. And he hangs up the phone. So he gives me the guy's number. It turns out the guy that he calls, his name was Walter Fondren. And if you're from Houston, Texas, you know Fondren, you know Fondren Street, right? Fondren. I mean, the whole city of Houston is built by the Fondrens.
Right.
To make a long story short, I meet with Mr. Fondren. He loves my idea. He ends up giving me a check for $50,000.
I love that story so much.
$50,000. And again, here's the cool thing about it. At the time, my credit was so bad.
You couldn't have gotten it.
I couldn't even deposit the check.
Oh no.
Because I had some outstanding stuff with some bad checks or something. And I had to go to a friend of mine to borrow some money to pay off those debts to deposit the money in the bank. So wow. It's just amazing though when you start trusting this divine intelligence and how it will guide you to ultimately fulfill your desires.
I love the backstory of that. I didn't know that part. That's awesome. What, you know, that the synchronicity that, but I also like how you just showed up and you were just helping and you were operating in excellence and you were just, you know, being your best self, being you really. But I've seen that transformation of human spirit when they're, you know, dealing with an adverse situation. I used to work for MD Anderson, And that was a common theme, that they would, you know, really see transformation in the relationships because they were very sick. And, you know, I would see that very often. So that's not an unusual thing to happen when you're dealing with a terminal illness. Um, but I want to really talk about, you've overcome so much adversity in your life. Um, but I want, you shared just a few. Do you want to share just some of the ones that were really pivotal to you doing the work that you do today? Because you don't necessarily work only with young people today. So talk a little bit about what that big
Well,
pivot was.
but I just want to share this though, because I think this is the challenge for entrepreneurs. Since we're focusing on entrepreneurs, it's important and critical that we as entrepreneurs be willing to do what I call the inner work.
Yes.
And when you start thinking about entrepreneurship, we think about things like the mechanics of starting and running a business, marketing, accounting, things like that.
Sales.
But very seldom do we talk about the inner work that needs to occur for us to be completely authentic in who we are. And so this process of what I'll call transformation is being willing to identify anything that's going to keep you from being your best self.
Yes.
So one of the things we don't hardly talk about is the impact of trauma and how trauma, if not healed, will constantly show up in our lives in different ways.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I talk about is my willingness to go to therapy, because I possibly had the worst childhood a child could have.
Right.
Every imaginable type of abuse I experienced between the ages of 6 and 13. I mentioned when I left my mom at 6 and lived with my grandmother, what I call my 7 years of hell, because literally that's what it was. But what we need to be willing to do as entrepreneurs is to talk about and heal from anything that we may not be aware of that can keep us from being the best entrepreneurs we can possibly be.
Right.
Therefore, it's important for us to be willing to do things like go to therapy or participate in a workshop that can help us heal from some childhood traumas. The most transformational thing that I've ever done for myself is some work with a guy named John Bradshaw, who unfortunately passed away just a couple of years ago, but he did a workshop called Healing Your Inner Child. And it was just so transformative, because what I learned was when I began this transformational journey, I was really into motivation. For example, I was a huge Anthony Robbins fan, the motivational guy. And I even did the walking across hot coals.
Yep, I did that too.
The fire walk.
Yeah.
And so I was doing all the motivational stuff, but there was something missing that I couldn't really put my finger on.
Yes.
And I read a book by John Bradshaw in which he talked about creating what he called an interpersonal bridge with another human being. And so he was talking about emotional healing. And when I read the book, I recognized that, you know, I was always motivated, rah, 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 let's go, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and all of that.
Yeah.
But there was still something missing. And so after reading that, I said, you know, I need to look at some stuff that I hadn't been willing to look at. And that's when I started that process of healing that childhood trauma. And when I did his inner child workshop, I was able to go back and heal that trauma emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. And it's what really set me free. Because what I learned through that process is one of the reasons I had been so successful in my life is because I was driven by a deep sense of shame. It was that shame that was driving me to succeed, because I had this insatiable need for other people's approval. And so in this healing process, I allowed myself to go, you know what? I'm lovable just the way that I am. I don't have to achieve anything. I don't have to accomplish anything. I can be happy with just myself. And that was the most powerful, transformative experience I've ever had because number one, it allowed me to heal that trauma, but it allowed me to accept self-love.
Yes.
It allowed me to be okay with me, just me, without accomplishments, without anything. And it literally transformed my life. So that healing process is something that we as entrepreneurs usually don't talk about. And there's a lot of people that will say, I don't want to bring up, my past. But until we make peace with our past, we can never fully be present.
Yeah.
And so being willing to deal with and heal that trauma is the key, I believe, to being truly happy with yourself.
No, I think completely entrepreneurship is an inside game, just like you said. And so much of it is really being in control, or not in control, but really minding your mindset. And if you are dealing with trauma or things that are unresolved, it keeps you stuck and not truly ever able to show up as what you should be in your business. And these days, there's no real separation between company and individual. Brands are all about, they're different than they used to be. It used to be, you didn't have to know who the CEO of the company was. You could just put the logo out there and people would connect with the logo. They want to see who the face is now. And so you really have to show up very authentically everywhere these days. So that's
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely.
really important.
Now here, let me share this little analogy, if you will, or metaphor maybe. You know the series Star Trek?
Of course.
I love Star Trek.
You're a Trekkie.
I'm really a Star Wars fan. If you look behind me here, you'll see little Yoda back.
I know. I already know you're a Star Wars. You quote Yoda quite a bit in this.
But here's a story from Star Trek, I think that really will hit home for a lot of people. So you've got the Starship Enterprise, right? Their spaceship, okay? And so you've got this Starship Enterprise, and then you've got this Klingon vessel, okay? Mm-hmm. So they're in space, right? Mm-hmm. So when the Klingons start attacking the Starship Enterprise, what do? They put the force field around the Enterprise, right?
Yeah.
Well, it takes a lot of energy to hold up that force field, a lot of energy. Yeah. So all these Klingons are firing at the Starship Enterprise, but it's got this shield on it. Now, when the Klingons decide to leave and pull away, if you keep that force field up, it's going to be depleting the energy inside of this Enterprise. Well, human beings are the same way. Yeah. When we get hurt, we create this force field to protect ourselves. And it's important that we have that field to deal with the traumas that we have to deal with.
Right.
But when that threat or that pain goes away, and we still have this force field up, we're extending a lot of energy trying to keep up with that force field. For example, for me, that energy was me trying to be this Mr. Nice Guy, this Mr. Everything's Great, this guy that needed all this approval. So it's draining.
Yes.
To carry that. So what we have to be willing to do is heal that trauma so that we turn that force field off. And now we have all that energy that we were using for that force field to be the best entrepreneur we can possibly be. But if we still got trauma and stuff, we've got this force field around us. And so there's a lot of talk about vulnerability these days. Yeah. With Brene Brown and everything. And basically what vulnerability is, being willing to take down that force field and connect to your authentic self. And that's a real challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs.
That is so good, Michael. That analogy, I will not forget that, because I literally can see that happening. People protect it, and you go naturally into defense mechanism mode and protecting and not being authentic. And it's really draining, to keep that up. Yeah, it's really draining. Yes. I really want to touch on this concept of compassionate capitalism. I want you to talk about that because I don't think I've ever heard it quite described this way, and I love the concept. So I want you to share it.
Well, again, the optimist in me sees a lot of shifting in society.
Yes.
And so, again, that optimistic part of me says, there's something happening in the world today.
Yes.
And I think what's happening is entrepreneurs are the key to resolving the majority of issues facing our world. I really believe that. And there's a new trend. Have you heard of the B corporations?
The
The
B.
B, yeah, it's called B Corp. So a B Corp basically is a corporation that you go through this organization. And what they do is they will go through your organization to see if you're really committed to diversity.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and so it's an interesting concept that's kind of new, but they talk about transparency and everything. And so there's this shift that corporations are going, we got to do business differently.
Yeah.
Well, when I think about compassionate capitalism, I think about a world where when we think of people like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and these guys that billionaires, and they make all this money. And politicians will demonize billionaires, saying that, the billionaires are, have more wealth than the bottom 75%. So you hear this thing about capitalism as a bad thing. But see, if we put it in a spiritual context, the purpose of capitalism, I believe, is to help make the world a better place. And so entrepreneurs that are what I'll call heart-centered entrepreneurs, they recognize that it's absolutely nothing wrong with making a lot of money, but it's more important to make a difference.
Yes.
Therefore, more entrepreneurs are now deciding that how can I use my products and services to make the world better? The beautiful part about that is when you have that attitude, the universe is going to support your business, because I believe in the law of attraction. What you put out, you bring to you. If my heart is in the right place, and obviously if I have a great product and a great service, then I should be able to attract my ideal customer. Compassionate capitalism says, yes, as a company, we want to make a profit, but more importantly, we want to make a difference. And there are more and more entrepreneurs that are embracing this idea. And so the whole illusion of wealth meaning, okay, so as a billionaire, I need to have, a Learjet and a yacht and, all these material things. I think that's changing. Mm-hmm. I think entrepreneurs are saying, how can I make an impact? How can I take my company to a place where the money that we're making is used to make the world better? And so I believe that as entrepreneurs, you should be willing, or you should be wanting to share your unique gifts and talents, because your product and service, bringing them to the world, is simply a way of being in service to humanity. Mm-hmm. And so by sharing my unique gifts and talents through my products and services, and I put that out into the universe and I'm saying, look, this is how I'm making the world better, the universe goes, hey, we're in alignment with that. We're going to send you the perfect customers. And that's how you really grow a business, by loving what you do, loving who you are, having a product and service that is making the world a little bit better, and being compensated for what you're providing.
Yeah. I know a lot of people are social entrepreneurs because they're focused on a social cause, but you're really talking about, regardless of if you're specifically working on a social cause, like say, for example, Purity Water. Their whole goal is to provide clean water in a lot of different parts of the world where they don't have access to clean water. That's not necessarily what you're talking about. You're talking about, even myself, I'm a graphic designer and I have a design business. If I want to make the world a better place and I am doing good work in the world, that I can also attract me, but I ultimately have to be willing to give back in a way that helps create a better environment for all people in the world, not just to make more money to put into my bank account, but I want to do some good in the world to help others.
But see, it comes back to my definition of an entrepreneur, someone who's compensated in exchange for a product or a service. So when you're putting out your service as a graphic designer, that's a service. If you're doing it from your heart, which I know you're very good at and you love doing it, then that, again, you're receiving your compensation, first of all, by the feeling that you get by doing great work. And then you're going to attract the customers to you that have that same energy, if you will, of taking your products and services, saying, hey, I align, and you don't even have to say this verbally, but your clients will, if you buy into this idea of the law of attraction, your clients will be attracted to you because of the energy you're putting out.
Right.
So if you see yourself as this person who is contributing to the world by sharing their gifts and talents, which is graphic design, then you're compensated by attracting the people that want that energy, if you will. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's, again, the law of attraction. You're attracting to you the people that need what you have. So I love that you explained that, because capitalism is taking a beating these days. But I also know that there's been a pact made by some of the top billionaires in the world, and they're wanting to make an agreement that they're going to leave money for causes to make the world a better place. They're not just going to give it to their children and, you know, to buy cars or you know, bigger airplanes. So that's good to know.
Bill Gates set that up, and he's got all these billionaires that are committed to not, number one, just giving their money to their kids, or
right.
They're saying, we're going to take this money and do something good in the world.
Good in the world, yes.
So, but once again, if you look at mainstream media, people are always attacking capitalism as though capitalism is the problem. Capitalism isn't the problem. Capitalists can be the problem.
Yes.
If the capitalist is selfish and greedy,
yeah.
then again, that's where the problem is. It's not capitalism. So America in and of itself is the result of capitalism. Without that, we would, you know, without the free enterprise system, we wouldn't be the country that we are. So rather than attack capitalism, we have to look at the capitalist. So how do we look at the capitalists? Well, we challenge them to embrace the new face of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
We challenge them to understand that there's nothing wrong with making money, and tons of it, but understand that if you're in that position, then you should be using that position in your own way, making the world a better place.
But there's also a patriarchal construct that
Right.
operated within for a really long time, and construct of being, you know, somewhat racist and a lot of gender bias and all these other issues that I think have to be torn down in order for the system to feel fair, equitable. You know, yes, you're right. In and of itself, it's probably not a bad system, but how it's been organized and how it's been operating and who it's been benefiting for the most part has been the smallest part of society. And also it's felt like many were just left out of the opportunities. That's why I think people feel like it's a bad system.
Right, but see, you have to understand though, the patriarchal system is no longer sustainable.
It's not, it hasn't been, right? But
And here's why. If you look at the feminist movement and what happened there, women said, no, we don't want to just stay home barefoot and pregnant. We
Right.
want to be out into the world. So guess what? Now in this country, there are more women in the workforce than men.
right.
There are more women graduating from college than men. So there's a shift, okay?
Yeah.
So once again, my optimism says this shift is for the better, because women now, if you look at politics and again, entrepreneurs, women are now just making amazing strides.
Oh my goodness.
You know, in the world today. So again, that's another reason for my optimism, because the whole patriarchal system, I don't want to say it's the problem, but we need to evolve away from that, and you cannot not have that happen. Why? Because divine intelligence knows exactly what it's doing, and it's moving away from that old model.
Yes, I agree 100%. It's happening whether they're ready for it or not, and because it cannot be sustained. And I think that's really important. But let's talk a lot about purpose, because I think a lot of people are struggling, especially young people, on how to find their purpose and how do they know when they've discovered their purpose. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, once again, I'll speak from a spiritual perspective. I think that
Please
every
do.
human being does have a divine purpose. Now, the problem is, too many times people think that a purpose has to be some grandiose, world-changing thing. No, a purpose is about recognizing and discovering what your unique gifts and talents are, and then figuring out how to take those unique gifts and talents and use them to make the world a better place. So your purpose is going to be found at the intersection of that which you love, okay, and are good at, okay, that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
That which you love and are good at, and what the world needs. So how can you take what you love and you're good at and apply it to make the world a better place in some way? So let's just say, for example, you love cars. You love washing cars. You're a car detailer, and it just lights you up to do it. So you start a business, a car detailing business. That could be your divine purpose. Yeah. Because it brings you joy to do it. You just love it.
Right.
So too many times people think that when you say purpose, it's this huge grandiose thing. But I love what Eckhart Tolle says. He says there's two types of purpose. There's your inner purpose and there's your outer purpose. Your inner purpose is to wake up and discover who you really are. And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about doing the work. Right. The only way to get to that is by doing the work, understanding who you really are, doing your inner work. That's your inner purpose. And your outer purpose is how you express who you are. Yeah. So for example, for me, my inner purpose was to wake up to and acknowledge that I have these amazing gifts of writing and speaking. Okay. It's what I love. It's what I'm passionate about. So I take that talent, those gifts and talents, and then I write books. I give speeches. I do webinars. It lights me up. I'm making the world a little bit better. Therefore, I am on purpose.
Right.
So it's a journey that we have to be willing to go on. I think what's really tripping a lot of people up is we live in this instant gratification society and everybody wants it right now.
Right away. Yeah.
I want my purpose. Okay, I'm going to just read this book and I'm going to find my purpose. It doesn't work that way. It's a journey. Yeah. So the first thing I always tell people to do is ask themselves, are they willing to go on their own transformational journey? That's where it starts. Yeah. Because on this transformational journey, if we're willing to do the work, our purpose will unfold. Yeah. I can guarantee you, if you start the journey, if you begin looking at and healing your past and moving past all those blocks that you have, I promise you, your purpose will show up. That's just the way the universe works. But you have to be willing to look within. So I love that saying. If you don't go within, you will always go without.
Yes.
You will not find your purpose out there somewhere. You will only find your purpose in here and in here. Yeah. So you have to be willing to do the work to connect to who you truly are. And once you do that, then you'll figure out the things that you love and how you can apply them to make the world a better place. Then you'll be on purpose.
I'm so excited because I've had conversations with two amazing people, and you two have virtually, and one was a woman and now I'm talking to a man, and you have virtually said the same things. She said the same thing you just said about doing the inner work and being willing to listen to yourself first, following your intuition. There's so much synergy with, once again, the entrepreneurs that I'm talking to. because we know what it takes to really create a successful business is making sure that we have done our work. Her saying is the work is not skippable. You just said it, you just said it a different way, but I really love that there's so much alignment and understanding that that is an important component to being an entrepreneur.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And too many times we skip over that. So let me share something with the audience that I think is important, because a lot of people will say, well, I don't know what I like to do. I don't know what I love to do. How do I find out what I love to do? Well, I'm going to share three ways to know if you're doing what you really love. Okay. First of all, if you're doing what you really love, you'll do it without the thought of compensation.
Do it for free.
Do it because you love it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be compensated for it,
right.
But that means even if you didn't get paid, you would still do it. For example, I love writing books. If I never sold a single book, I would still write books.
Right.
Why? Because I love it.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, when you're doing what you love, time disappears.
Yeah. What they call that state is called what? Flow, I think it is. Yeah, you're in the flow.
It's called the flow state. So for example, as a writer, I love writing. I can be at my computer for 12 hours writing, and I swear to you, it feels like 10 minutes. Time just disappears. It just goes away. And we've all had that experience where we're doing something and then time you lose track of it. It's non-existent. You're what they would call in the present moment.
Yes.
And that's when you know that you're doing what you love, because time will just disappear. And last thing to know when you're doing what you love is that you want to share it with others. When you're doing what you love, you want to share it. Now, doesn't have to mean you're going to share it through books or anything, but you have someone that you're really close to that you want to share. Look what I've done. You want to share that with others. And it's not about gaining other people's approval. It's about sharing your gifts with them so that they can experience it also. So those are three ways to know that you're doing what you really love.
It's so funny because I've been working on a course, and it's all about building a website. And I did an exercise inside of the course about finding your niche. And you just described my exact process that I have my students go through for finding a niche. I talk about, figuring out what you're passionate about, but I said also where you would do it for free. But you also have to have some expertise in it. You can't just be doing it for free, but not be any good. You have to be really good at it, crank out excellence in that area. So I love that you reinforce those concepts, because I think people are struggling, and especially in this age of instant gratification or wanting some type of quick blueprint to success, or can I get you from 0 to 7 figures in the next, year. Everybody wants to get to that next level because somehow they feel like that is going to change their life and they'll be happy without all the other work that we're talking about here, the inner work that they have to do. So I love that, Michael. Thanks for really breaking that down. I think that's so important. But I'm interested, if you could maybe give yourself one piece of advice to your younger self, because there's lots of young people probably out here what would that piece of advice be? If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would that be?
Be happy first. And here's what I mean by that. I used to believe that once I got rich, I'd be happy. I used to believe that if I accomplished certain things, I would be happy. I used to believe that if I was married, had a family, I would be happy. So I put all of my focus on things outside of myself, thinking those things would make me happy.
Yes.
But you have to be happy first.
So good, Michael.
So, and that's when I start talking about the inner work, that's
Yes.
what that's about. It's
Yes.
about being happy first, because if you're not happy, no matter what you accomplish, you're still not going to be happy. So
Right.
we keep chasing this carrot, of happiness, like just the right car, the right relationship, and then I'll be happy. No, be happy now.
Because it might keep moving. You get that, and then you got to get another thing, and then it's always changing.
Yeah, and let me share this story, because this is how I figured that out. Because during the darkest period of my life, I was sitting at the edge of my bed, looking across the room at my bookshelf, when I happened to notice that every book on my bookshelf had something to do with getting rich and making money.
Yes, I remember you said.
And as I looked at those books, this question just popped in my head. And it was this: Michael, what if you took all the energy and effort you used in trying to get rich and simply figure out how to be happy?
Oh yeah, I remember that chapter. I think I have. Yes, that was.
It was that question, Frank, that changed my life forever. Because
Wow.
in that moment, I wish I could describe it in words, but in that moment, I had this amazing clarity. I was completely broke. I was completely depressed. But in that moment, all of a sudden, my depression lifted.
Yeah.
And this clarity, somehow intuitively, I knew that I was going to be able to rebuild my life. And as a result of asking that question, I stopped reading books on getting rich and making money. I dove into psychology, philosophy, spirituality, metaphysics, personal development. And so I simply became committed to being happy.
Yes.
And I decided that even if I never got rich, I was going to figure out how to be happy.
What a great goal to strive for.
Yeah,
Happiness.
yeah, I just want to be happy. I say,
Yeah.
God, look, I just want to be happy. I don't care if I get any stuff. Just
Yeah.
let me, because I remembered as a child the feeling of happiness.
Yes.
But I also realized that it had been a long time since I had felt that
Felt.
feeling.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring that back. And that's what my journey has allowed me to do. And I can honestly say, in this very moment, I am happier now than I've ever been in my life.
Wow. I love that. I love that. I really feel your happiness. I mean, if anyone who engages with Michael anywhere, online and in person, he does give off that joy, not just happiness, but like joy. Like you talk about in your book, joy and passion. And I feel that in the interactions that I have with you always. So that I know it's real and it's authentic. Sometimes you can tell, people can say, oh, I'm so happy, but then you interact with them and they're they're not quite that. They come across as maybe they're not so happy, and so it's like there's an incongruence with what they're saying and how they're actually interacting with you.
Well, I pretended to be happy for a very long time. When I was
Do
married,
you make it that somebody tell you to do that?
yeah, but see, when I was married and living the so-called American dream, in my mind, I thought I was happy
Right.
because I had all the stuff. But in my heart, I knew I didn't feel happy.
Something was wrong. Yeah.
But I pretended for a very long time that I was happy.
But you can only do that for so long, right? Until
Oh,
it
absolutely.
starts to really cripple you, and internally, because you can only fake it for so long.
Yeah.
I think that's why I don't like that saying, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you never may make it. How long can you fake it?
Yeah, but see, you have to shift that a little bit, because I do believe in you have to faith it until you make it.
Oh, but that's a different word. Faith.
Exactly. So faith it until you make it is more appropriate, because you want to have faith to move toward what you want in life, but don't fake it. Fake it will not get you there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What are you doing, Michael, that really helps you to thrive? that really helps you? I mean, you know, you're doing so many amazing things, but just give us a little bit of a little glimpse into what your kind of day looks. I actually, before I do that, I wanted to ask you this because I think this is really important. How do you know when you're doing something that you truly love? Is it just that you could do it all day without getting compensation, or tell me how do you know?
Well, see, one of the things that we have to be willing to do is be in touch with our bodies.
Okay.
Be in touch with our feeling. The feelings, emotions are just energy in motion. Feelings are the language of the soul. So when we're in touch with our feeling, and for men, this is really difficult because we're conditioned as men not to feel.
That's true.
But the key is feelings are just the soul's way of navigating through life. You'll know where you are, what you love, based on how you feel. What is the energy inside of you? Now, we can rationalize and intellectualize and talk about how we're doing in life, but the true measure is the energy that we feel inside. So I talk a lot about happiness. And yes, that's an energy, that's a feeling. It's not something you intellectualize, you feel. There's a joy in that. So for me, how I know that I'm doing what I love, it's by the feeling that I have while I'm doing it. So I believe that when you feel joy, when you feel love, or shall I say, when you feel positive emotion, that lets you know that you're connected to the divine source. Whenever you feel negative emotions, that simply means you're disconnected from the source. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling anger, if you're feeling pessimistic, see, those are just symptoms of being disconnected from the source. So for me, I must stay connected to the source. And a couple of ways that I do that. First of all, I'm a firm believer and proponent of meditation. I've been meditating for almost 30 years now, and it's how I start my day. Every morning when I wake up, the first thing I do, even before I get out of bed, I have a quiet moment of contemplation of gratitude. I usually will wake up, I'll lay in bed for a moment, I'll look over at my wife and I'll smile because I'm so blessed to have her in my life. Yeah. And I'll just say thank you. And then I'll get up. And then I read, there's a guy, are you familiar with Mike Dooley, the guy that sends out the notes from the universe?
I'm familiar with the notes from the universe, but I didn't know his name. Yeah,
his name is Mike Dooley. He sends out these really amazing notes from the universe. And so just imagine that every morning when you wake up, you're getting a note from God. Yeah. And it's basically this really powerful, positive message, if you will. But what I'll do is I'll read his note, and then I'll basically just contemplate in that moment what it means for me. And so it's a really spiritual practice that keeps me connected to my source. Yeah. And it fills me, F-I-L-L, fills me with love, joy. And that's usually how I start my day. And that's how I know when I'm doing what I love. It's by the feeling, the energy that's moving through me.
Like you said in the beginning, though, you have to be very attuned to your body and, you know, really know it enough that you spent enough time with yourself where you recognize when something is off and you can feel it in your body. Because I remember when I felt loss, a profound loss, it made me physically ill. And I wasn't sick, but it actually started causing me heart palpitations and other types of physical manifestations. So I know that to be true. When you have feelings and emotions that are causing you pain, it will trigger other physical symptoms in your body. So you have to really be aware of those changes and recognize them.
Well, science is now explaining to us how thoughts create dis-ease or
Yeah.
disease. So when we're having negative thoughts, which generate negative feelings, then the body responds negatively.
Yes.
So it's important for us to understand it. And, it's amazing how, once again, because of the society and culture we live in, people think that, oh, he's just that airy-fairy new age guy. But there's actually science behind
Science,
everything.
yeah.
There's science behind everything I do.
Yeah.
So I love the feeling of feeling good, but also I recognize the science behind feeling good makes my body healthier.
Absolutely.
So it's
It
important
even
that,
makes you look younger longer. I mean, it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile.
right.
And, that's why I look so young.
There you go. There you go.
I mean, we're both on the other side of 50 and we look young.
We love that Franca smile, boy, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel like, I'm going to try to give off the energy that I want to experience in my life. And I'm like you, I have to have some type of pattern that I experience every day that helps me, because I'm giving so much of myself to my customers and I'm sharing, that I have to start the day with some type of a process, like connecting to my source. I pray, I meditate as well. I really focus a lot on gratitude. I journal, because those things help me to connect to my source also. I call it God, and just like you, in the universe. But what are some things, like I mentioned before, that you're doing that help you to thrive? Um, and I'm not talking about financial, even though I know that you're doing very well, but I'm talking about that helps you to stay connected to your purpose.
Well, I'm a firm believer in something I learned from Anthony Robbins, which is CANI, C-A-N-I.
I remember him talking about that.
Constant and never-ending improvement.
Yes.
I mentioned that I believe in evolution. And so I believe that our minds are evolving, and the way that we evolve is by learning new things. And so I am a commitment to learning new things all the time. I'm always learning new things. I love reading and checking out the science and what's happening in the world. But it's really about my commitment to constant and never-ending improvements to become the best version of myself.
Right.
And one of my mentors is a guy named Neil Donald Walsh. And Neil Donald Walsh said that our purpose is to become the grandest version of the greatest vision we hold for ourselves as human beings.
Wow.
And I love that, because that's my goal, is to become the grandest version of the greatest vision I hold for myself. And therefore, it is that vision that drives me to constantly want to be better.
Yeah.
So I live in a constant state of improvement.
I love that. And I'm a proponent in reading and filling your mind and always staying in that constant state. Are you cutting out some things out of your life that you maybe used to do that are keeping you in a good state of learning? Because I'm getting more off of social media. I'm not telling anybody what to do, but I've actually recently deactivated my Facebook so that I can spend more time focused on being productive in other areas of my life. And I find that I really didn't miss it. I enjoy reading more and spending more time and focusing. So I'm wondering, what are some other things that you're eliminating that are helping you to thrive?
Well, again, I was speaking to a publisher the other day. A publisher was contemplating carrying one of my books, and one of the first things they asked me was, "How many followers do you have on Instagram?" And I said, "Well, to be honest, I said, I'm not big on followers. Matter of fact, I don't even like the term.
I hate the term.
Followers."
Yeah.
I said, but I post on social media. Most of the stuff I do is personal stuff. I don't really promote my business from a business standpoint. I know I could do better with that, but it's really not that important to me
Exactly.
to have followers. What I do is I do what I love, which is I write and I speak.
Yeah.
And so I trust, I really trust that the universe is going to give me everything I need to fulfill the dreams that I have, financially and otherwise. And so, like yourself, I'm not real active on social media.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm trusting that I have a message that's really important
Yeah.
that I want to get out there. So yes, I want to get out there, but I do that generally through my publicist, who gets me the interviews and TV
Right.
interviews and newspaper interviews and stuff like that. So um, I'm minimizing. I minimize my social media, but I guess the one thing that I really cut out, if there's something that I cut out, is watching the news.
I did that too.
um,
Boy, that
I
was
don't
affecting me.
Yeah, I don't watch the news. I mean, I'll flip it on when there's a story that I want to see or something. But if I want news, I'll read it
Yeah.
online or something. I don't watch it.
You're exactly like me, Michael. I do the same thing. I couldn't tell you the last time I sat down and watched the news.
Yeah,
I mostly just, what I want to read, something specific. Because I notice, and this is probably because I watch a lot of documentaries. I love documentary films. I find that you're reading what they think you want to see. And so because there's so much content about what our likes and our habits, we probably like too many things. And so now they're putting content in front of us they think we want to consume. So you're not necessarily getting a balanced view of what's happening in the world.
yeah.
So that's the other thing. So what advice would you give to someone up and coming that wants to start a business?
First thing,
Mhm.
be happy.
Okay. be happy first.
I can't minimize that. Be happy. Um, it's really important that you figure out what you love to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Take the time
find
to do that, right?
find out what you love to do and put all your energy in figuring that out, because once you figure it out, now you've got a great starting point to find your true purpose and passion in life.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would say. I would say, first of all, figure out what you love to do, and the rest will.
I've been consuming books from Cal Newport recently. He has this book called Be So Good They Can't Ignore You.
Mm,
And he talks about just what you're saying. Really double down on what you think you love to do. Just like go all in. Don't even offer to work for someone that can apprentice you. If you don't have access, and offer to work for them for free. Most people these days want like a paid job, and they haven't apprenticed anywhere. They want to make money, but they haven't shown that they have any expertise or mastery in a particular area. I'm not going to pay you if you've only helped yourself. I want to know that you have some expertise in that area. So,
well, actually, let me back up a minute. Now that I think about this, the first thing I think everyone must do is you must be willing to make peace with your past,
okay.
because we all have experienced some sort of traumas in our lives, and it
You
doesn't
think
have to.
so? Everybody's experienced some trauma.
Yeah, because here's what I mean by trauma. Trauma does not necessarily mean physical abuse or verbal abuse. Trauma could be your dad one day telling you that he's disappointed in you.
Got it.
That could be traumatic for some people.
That's true.
And so everyone has different levels of trauma, but until we uncover, discover that little thing that may be keeping us from being who we truly are, something's going to be missing. There's a guy named Tim Keller,
Mhm.
wrote an amazing book called True Purpose.
Mhm.
And he says in his book that we all have what he calls a sacred wound. And what he meant by that is there's an experience that we have that in that moment we decide that there's something wrong with us.
Yeah.
So for example, for me, my sacred wound was when I was 6 years old and my mom took me to live with my grandparents. That experience is what set in motion my whole, people call it abandonment issue.
Right.
So that set in motion everything for me. So that was my sacred wound, that one experience. But again, a sacred wound could be something as simple as your dad saying, I'm disappointed in you.
Yeah.
And so if we have that experience, what it does is it's, in my opinion, it's what the Bible means when they say, what do they call it? Original sin. Original sin is in the moment when we decide that there's something wrong with us and we're not lovable. That to me is original sin. Something happens, we make a decision that something's wrong with us, and then we spend our whole lives trying not to experience that which we think we are or not. So being willing to, again, just examine some of those wounds that we have is the key to freedom.
Yeah.
If we aren't willing to really look at those things, we'll sabotage our lives down the road somehow.
Yeah.
So I really believe that the first step for each of us is to be willing, simply be willing to examine, maybe there's an event that has triggered us to go into this mode of, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough.
Yeah. Because you're right, it'll show up in your business and how you treat your team and how you treat others. Yeah, it shows back up again and again.
Absolutely. So,
Michael, this has been so wonderful, but I really want people to know what you're working on now that you're really excited about.
Oh man, yeah, I'm launching a new community.
Oh, awesome. Tell us about it.
It's called the Joypreneur Community.
Joypreneur, I love that.
So the Joypreneur Community is based on the book, and it's specifically for entrepreneurs. And it's going to be an amazing resource for entrepreneurs who are ready and committed to doing this inner work to become the best entrepreneurs that they possibly can be. And the tagline of it is empowering entrepreneurs to build companies that change the world.
Ooh, I love that.
That's my new mission, if you will.
Yes,
The Joypreneur Network.
I love the name just by itself, you know.
Yeah.
I just think that it's going to attract, like you said, a lot of wonderful people who want to do amazing work in the world. How can we find out more about what you're doing? How do we find out about your work or work with you? You know, where do we go?
Well, the simplest way is just go to coachmichaeltaylor.com.
Okay.
That's my speaker website, and so you can access me there through email or see all my social media properties and all of that from coachmichaeltaylor.com.
Oh my gosh, Michael, I probably could talk to you for another hour or so because there's so much good stuff in this book. But I just wanted to first just thank you for being one of my first guests. You were like so great. This book is amazing. And I'm going to probably put it on my website and maybe send a copy to someone. But I'm going to try to gift it to a few friends of mine that are interested in entrepreneurship because I think it's that good. So thanks for sharing that gift with the world. Please go to francabali.com/podcast, and you'll be able to not only download a copy of the podcast, but also leave a comment from Michael and let him know what you thought of this conversation. We're also going to post a video on my YouTube channel where you can watch Michael and I have this conversation. It's been such a joy talking to him. His work is wonderful and transformative, and it's going to really help so many people. So thank you again for being on the podcast, Michael.
Thank you, Frank. I love you a bunch. Glad to see you. And you just keep on rocking. You just keep on rocking.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Give my love to Bedra, his amazing wife. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Dream and Thrive podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.
Be happy.
Be happy. Do your work.
Do your inner work.